So hopefully after all of that process that you've seen, you've made a decision whether to make candy sugar or not. Now what I've done since then is turn out the sugar and place it on some grease-proof paper. Now that is the block of sugar. So as you can see, you're not quite getting the full colour of it. However, with the power of a 400 lumen torch, you don't need to have that, you can see what a wonderful piece of stuff that is. It's art, isn't it? It's art. You could just make windows out of that stuff. So that's your sugar. I'm not sure that that's going to help, but there you see it. It's which way do I need to be going? Camera that way. So yeah, and that's the side where the swirls were. I think I'm not sure. You've got to shine the light on that. There you go. There's the swirls that I did. So you know, really is quite fantastic. So, and the best thing is we're going to smash this up and put it in the beer. Sorry, the cider. Now, if I was making beer, again I would smash it up. It would go into my boil along with the hops towards the end. Generally, the last 15 minutes of my boil, I'd put that in small pieces. You can, if you want, you can smash it up. You can put it in your coffee. Please excuse my Bob Marley chubbity, but that tends to go off every now and then. So, candy sugar, all done, all dusted, fantastic piece of equipment. Just go and make some. Now, we're going to go on to the actual turbo cider very shortly. I've got my bucket. Rather than use a fermenter, I'm going to use a bucket because after the first day I'm going to obviously make sure that the yeast has taken hold, and I'm going to do what I generally do with my beers, and that's drop it, which effectively means transfer it into another vessel and sloshing it around so that I can get some air into it and help the yeast on, you know, because it does like air. So I've done that, I've shown you that. Next thing is to do the actual turbo cider itself. So I've got a number of cartons of apple juice to prepare prior to making this, and I've also got to go and smash this stuff up, and I'll show you very shortly what happens from there. Cheers. So I've gone into the garden, I've smashed with a hammer the cane sugar. That helps you get some nice lumps in it, like that. Obviously you're thinking, why have I done this in the first place? Actually it reminds me of those fireplaces people used to have in the 70s. So I've got that. I'm going to put some warmed apple juice in there just to dissolve it again. Now that's obviously going to cook it slightly, but we're going to cook it in a more liquid, well, there'll be more liquid, so therefore it won't be going toffee browning, so we just want to dissolve that. So I'll do that right now. So I have a room that smells like toffee apples now, which is really quite nice. I do think to myself I should put some spice in, but I'm not going to. What I did use was a litre of my apple juice in a saucepan, got that to a boil. Just before it boiled, I tipped it over the top of the crushed candy sugar and let it sit for 5 minutes. Now, letting it sit, it will eventually sort of turn into a nice sticky mass. What I then decided would be a better idea, because normally, as I say, I'd put this in my boil and I'd just leave it. 15 minutes later it's done, and I wanted this to be a bit quicker, is I got another saucepan and I transferred some of the apple juice and sugar into it, or was stuck to the spoon, and I put it on a very mild heat. One was off and one was on, and I just stirred it around, and it will eventually dissolve. So it's probably taken about 7 minutes, so maybe a bit of patience. I'm sure if you was to put it on and leave it and come back to it and give it a stir once in a while, it will clear. Very similar when you're making any kit equipment. they ask you to put sugar in and some hot water and dissolve it. It does take a while. It's amazing how long it takes. But I'm sure if you put it in and there was an odd few clumps sort of at the bottom of your fermenter, it would get eaten up. You know, maybe a bit of slow release, a bit of extra sugar later on, as it were, as opposed to swamping the yeast with sugar. But I've now got a nice pan of dark red apple juice. I'm now going to pour the rest of the apple juice into the fermenting bucket. I'm not going to bore you with that. However, I would like to say one thing. This is an empty carton. As a suggestion, I normally pull all of my bottoms like this, yeah, and then when it comes to putting them in, I snip the top, I turn it over, and when I turn it over, I just cut this bottom off. That then allows pretty much it to flow out because there's air. If you're only doing 4, don't worry about it. But if you're doing 20, I use the fermenter because it's quite handy because that just sits in the roof. But yeah, just go along, a little bit of a production line, get them out, cut them all. I do like to give them a little spray with Star Sand because they've been sitting in the supermarket and you don't want any of that dust falling in. So little wipe, give them something, you know, just don't think that because the stuff's inside and that's alright. This contains some dust and dirts, you know, people pick them up, you know. You don't know what people got in their hands, do you? It's like money. So, little top tip for you. Right, next to fill that up. So we've got just about 11 litres in there. What I do need to do, and you need to do, if you're making this along with me, is to get yourself a cup of boiling water. And in this case, put a couple of tea bags in it. That is just a couple of tea bags stewing. Now, it's 100 degrees. It's probably only about 95 out of my press a button tea maker. So that should need to sit for at least 10 minutes really, because we want to make sure it's sterile. Yeah, you don't want to introduce anything because we don't know what's been sitting in the tea, do we? So you don't want to introduce any bacteria or germs. Now, that's 11 litres. I've also placed a teaspoon of yeast nutrient into the sugar solution, which is sitting over on the hob. That's the next step. I'm going to put the sugar solution into here, and with a paddle, sterilised paddle, as it's sitting in my box of sterilised equipment. It's all been Star Sand. I'll give it a little bit of a stir around. Now, something I didn't mention in a previous video with reference to the yeast is that there's also a quarter teaspoon of yeast nutrient in amongst that. So just a pinch really, just to help it along, because I appreciate that if I'm making yeast or growing yeast for beer, I'm going to use malt extracts, and I think there's a few more lovelies in there than there are in apple juice, so I've given it a bit of a yeast nutrient to help it on its way. It's not a problem, just don't overdo it. So I'm now going to tip the sugared water, which has hopefully been dissolved. I'll check it and then stir into here, and I'll be back. So this is our yeast spinning away. The cider was in the bottle was the experiment, just to prove a point, and I can quite happily say to you there is more yeast in there than there was, and this has been spinning. Now the only test really for us to do is take it off the stir plate and then make sure that the yeast smells good. Now, as I said earlier, you will know if it smells nasty, it's likely to be nasty. If it smells nice, then you will know it will be good. So I'm just going to pause the video and I'll be back in a second. So the moment of truth. The old Rosie, I've taken the protective silver foil off. You know, you can't get through silver foil. It's like lions and chairs, yeah? They're frightened of it. So nasty bacteria doesn't like yeast. So what we've got here is the Old Rosie. I'm going to pull the top of it and give it a smell. So I've not done this before, so this is as it happens. Now, I want to drink that, which brings me to a strange thing that I haven't actually done today, apart from tea. Drunk a lot of tea today. So, what I'm going to very quickly do is get myself prepared for obviously the bigger batch, because can't not be testing out the bigger batch. But before I do that, I need to actually make myself a small homebrew. So 2 seconds. So as you can see, I've poured myself a homebrew and it's really quite nice. I'll just go and get another one. It's much better. What I'm going to do now is put the tea, now that it's cold, well, it's not cool, but excuse me, it's cooler than it was, into there, and we then need to give it a bit of a stir, and I need to check the yeast, so I just want to make sure everything's in there first. I could bore you with it, but I'm not going to bore you with it because it's boring, so bear with me. So, tea's in there, the sugar's in there, the juice is in there, I've placed the Old Rosie in there. Does that smell good? Now, this is the big test, so we'll give it a little swill. And it's good, it's good. Now, if you do this, you will at some point forget. I've forgotten many a time. And the bottom of that is your stir bar. Now you don't necessarily want to get your stir bar out beforehand, but you can put a magnet onto the base of it and pull it up the side. Now I haven't got a particularly big magnet at the moment, so rather than leave it on the base, I'm actually going to take it out. My hands are nice and clean, so make sure I give it a swell, because if it's settled, any of that yeast you don't want left in there, it needs to go in here. So snap the lid on, and I'll take it to a nice, well, temperature now. Normally, if you keep it between 21 degrees, you're going to be fine. So I've come round to the side of my house where I keep my incubator. The incubator is effectively a fridge. It has a PID on it, and as much as I set that to a temperature I want, and the fridge will keep it at that temperature. So if it's too hot, it will cool it down. If it's too cold, it will heat it up. It does that with I've actually had to take it apart because I bought this for a wonderful price because it was making some noise, and it turns out that behind here there's two fans. One sucks, one blows, and behind here there's some resistance wire, and in the upper part there is a fridge mechanism as well. So it's pretty much a fridge with a heater in it. So if it gets hot, the fridge will turn on and make it cold. If it gets too cold, that the heating elements will turn on and make it warm. Now you do get to a point where it's going hot cold, but there's a certain amount of technology built into this device here, so you can set it so it's not turning on, constantly turning on, turning off. It's controlled by a nice little knob there, and when you close the door, the fans will run, and depending if it needs to get hotter or colder, it will put the heat on or the cold on. Now I've actually I did set it for 24. I've obviously missed it just by a bit, so actually no, it is 24, because I haven't changed the temperature that way. So that's how we change it there. Put the safety on. Anyhow, there you go, the fridge kicked in there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and put the light on, and I'm going to put the beer, cider, my apologies, into the incubator. There you go, it's now sitting in there. It's currently 23.6 degrees. Hopefully the thermostat in there will adjust and take it to the temperature I require. As I say, I set it for 25. I know that there is a slight difference between what this says and what's actually in there. So I've worked that out over a period of time. So if that says 25, I actually know that I'm a couple of degrees higher than it will be. So hopefully I'll come back in an hour or so and see if it's equalised out. And obviously I'll come back tomorrow to see if there's any activity, because I appreciate that we've pitched some yeast in there and it's not necessarily the correct volume, it may be just slightly under. So we need to understand if we need to go for plan B, which is add some additional yeast. But I've done it before, I'm more than happy to let it run. So let's go. Now remember, once you've done all of that, all the good stuff, all the bits that we've been trying to do over the last couple of days, albeit I would have done this in a day, apart from the yeast, that does take some time, but I've been trying to record it for you all, yeah, Roy, maybe Roy and some other person who's looked at Roy's videos and thought, oh, I'll have a look at his videos, but not many other people. So I dare say we're about here, down there, number of hits. If it gets above 10, I'll be amazed. But that said, the internet's a strange thing, and millions of people watch silly little things. So I bit my finger. But no, that's funny because we've all seen it. Yeah, everyone's seen it. It's funny, but how many million hits has that got? Baby's bitten someone's finger. Remember Police Squad? Right, I'll say cheers, happy cleaning up, and I will report back on how that, round the corner, I say round the corner because you have no idea that it's over there, it'll be over there, is getting on. I might crack the lid, give you a little picture, might even record the sound of the yeast bubbling away, because that's generally how I do it, because I don't like to open it up. Because you keep opening it up, closing it, you're going to, possibly infect it. Not the case really, certainly because mine's around the corner in a fairly clean environment, as much as the door's shut, and I know that it's been cleaned and effectively it's sterile. Anything gets in there, it's not going to be around for much long. One point I did notice, whilst I was doing this, and there are a number hanging around, and I don't know if it's time of year, but fruit flies. Now generally I know you have the odd banana kicking around and you let that go a bit longer, and we've had a lot of fruit out the garden in the house, but I tend to make sure that it's been washed with Camden tablets so it is preserved a bit longer, kill all the yeasts off the top of it, or make them stick. But I've noticed there is a lot of fruit flies around. Now, little quick tip, if you get yourself some cider vinegar, because they are attracted to apples, I think it's the acid. Obviously this is the reason why they're here, because it's apple juice. If you get a bowl of cider vinegar, or cider, and just leave it because it will eventually turn into vinegar because it will go off, and a small drop, literally a drop of washing up liquid, you will probably wake up and find a number of fruit flies. Now, what happens is, you putting the washing up liquid in there makes the surface tension that much easier. So they basically land on it. Normally you'd land on it and they would float. Yeah, very similar. If you go and get yourself a bowl and sprinkle some talcum powder on it, it will form a skin, and you can put your finger in and you can see the surface tension because you're adding something on there. But the natural surface tension of water, small animals like that, they've got more little tiny hairs on themselves, so therefore they're slightly buoyant and they won't dip through. Yeah, go and watch a pond scatter video. But because you've put some washing up liquid in there, that surface tension doesn't quite make them float, so they'll touch it and they'll have a drink before they go. But you'll be amazed, there'll be a number of fruit flies contained within that bowl. So I'm not going to do that because I don't have any need to. But you get those fruit flies in your bin underneath the bucket, they will cause problems, because I understand they will make your, I don't know why I'm brushing my hair back, Normally when it's Christmas I always get the hair slide and the hair slide and comb, and when I go to hotels I have to ring the reception and complain, why is there a shower cap in my room, and a hairdryer, but that's another story. So yeah, you don't want them in your beer because they will make your beer, cider, turn to acid because they're bastards. So happy homebrew, and I'll report back soon.